Hello, AP. And now we start the interesting topic called the Protestant Reformation. If you want to know one single event that changes the entire course of European and world history, this is one of them. This is where one aspect of a society is going to change, religion, and then impact everything from the arts to politics to the age of exploration to you name it. Literature, everything. And so this is one of the major things that we need to talk about. And this is a thing that will show up throughout the entire course from this point on. So, what caused this thing is that the Reformation is going to break out in Germany first. And part of the reason in the Switzerland is because you have those weak power states, those places that are not unified. So in Italy, the lack of centralization drove the formation of the arts and trade. So that the trade, the independence, allowed them to pursue their own ideas, their own nature, which then allowed them to form economic bonds and economic power, which then created the arts and the ideas, which led to the Renaissance. Well, that lack of centralization in Germany does have a trade aspect. You have the Fugars, the bankers, and you have that central trade, European trade going through the central part of Europe. But that lack of control, especially in the northern areas, are going to manifest itself in a reform movement of the Catholic Church, wanting change. Um, and you already had the problems that there is this massive corruption that's going to feed that desire for change. You have the Babylonian captivity, where you had the popes moving to France. You had the wealth and power of the Catholic Church being flaunted. You had the schism, which you saw this split between the art and decadency of the Renaissance popes. The fact that the lay criticism, that the lay people of the church are growing, they're the ones paying the money into the church, and they have no real power. That you have these wealthy bankers and that are controlling this. And the fact that it was out for the highest bidder. And here's an example: you have Rodrigo Borgia, the Renaissance, the corruption, the orgy pope, as we call him. Where there's just massive amounts of wealth and nepotism. And then the one of the bigger problems too is that you had this absentee leader concept, that you had these bishops, these archbishops that were literally bishops of areas that they're not going to. So there's no political power, on top of the fact that there's no one to oversee the church, which then increases it. So you've got a lack of power, a lack of control with absentee bishops who are basically bishops in name only, and they're collecting the money, and they're nowhere even near the flock. So the Catholic Church couldn't even exude control over them if it tried. You've got corruption with, like we said, both physically with the orgy popes and the decadency of the Renaissance popes. You have families, wealthy families, buying the papacy by paying off the clergy. And that lack of centralized power in Germany is going to allow, and we'd seen pushback. We saw Huss and Wycliffe, and they were away from Rome. And so now there's just this hotbed, and add to it the humanism that came out of the Renaissance and the printing press, which is spreading ideas and promoting reading. And the Catholic Church would tell you one thing, and then you would read the Bible and go, wait a minute, that's not what it says. And so all of this feeds into this desire for change. And the thing that's going to push it over the top is the sale of indulgences, that the Catholic Church is selling salvation. And they're using that money then to pay for the the building of Vatican City. And so they're selling the very thing that they're supposed to be here on earth promoting. And this was indulgences were a thing and were perfectly legal in the Catholic Church, but they were usually given out as special blessings to forgive sins. Well, now you could buy one of these indulgences and get your family out of purgatory And Tietzel, who was one of the top sellers, he's the one that's promoting this. There's also a cultural educational change that the urban populace are more read and less and more critical of the Catholic Church than the rural populations. You're seeing this idea of humanism that's now impacting, and you have Renaissance monarchs who are reading Machiavelli and realizing, wait a minute, I can use religion as a tool to gain power. That either by being a Protestant, I can gain more power because not only do I make the people loyal to me and not the church, but I can seize church land, which is a huge amount of money that I can either extort or I can reward people for. You also see this idea that for the ones that are closer to the Catholic Church, like in states like near the Papal States, that maybe the church then becomes a way of maintaining power. You see this growth of humanism and that goes along with the reading that I can choose my destiny. And like we said, there are people that have been questioning, like Wycliffe and Huss, who are already promoting ideas that the Bible should be the true voice of religion and not the papacy, and are promoting ideas that salvation is the key that one can grant themselves through asking for forgiveness. So all these things are challenging the power of the church. And we said again, printing press, this idea of spreading ideas and spreading thought is going to intensify this. And books become cheaper because they're producing paper and they're also printing. The Catholic Church is going to try to squash these new ideas, but of course, that just intensifies the criticism of the church. And you can see that concentration. This is one of those maps that notice this area here lacks the printing press. It has a huge top down government. You have autocratic rulers in the form of Ivan the Terrible, or here with the Ottoman Turkish sultans. They can suppress those ideas, but by suppressing the ideas, they're also stagnating control. They're stagnating their societies. These are areas of high serfdom. Serfdom here is going to end way later than anywhere else. Over here, this is the political control by the religious powers of Castile Aragon, which are going to become, this is what's going to become France. So there's less printing presses here because that's religious control being manipulated by the government to maintain authority. But this is those intelligent merchants who are then reading and using the printing presses for political and economic gain, and the lack of there's no centralized governmental power to control the ideas. And of course, you see the same thing here. You see a lot of these in the printing presses in northern Italy too, and that's a Renaissance impact. But these wealthy merchants, they're feeding these printing presses, and the printing presses are feeding them. It's a mutual thing, and that's what's the idea of knowledge then becomes a weapon in this. And here's your 300 states right there. That division of power, that's what allows for the papacy to lose control. The states down further close, down here, closer to the Italian papal states, they're going to be a lot closer to the Catholic Church. But the farther you go away, hence England, northern Germany, those states are ripe for revolution, for reformation. Who's going to spread it is Martin Luther. There's a whole bio. We'll talk a bit about him in class. But Martin Luther is an educated monk. He's teaching in the city of Wittenberg. He was a lawyer by trade originally, but always wanted to be a religious leader. He always wanted to be a monk. And after an incident in his life, he changes his life over from being a lawyer to being this. What happens is that he's teaching theology, and Luther is basically, the problem is that he can't see how the Catholic Church's justification for the giving away of salvation, that how you have to get it through the church, that he, like it says, considered that God does not demand charitable acts, which is a key concept of the Catholic Church, and that he doesn't believe that the Catholic Church can grant salvation. He believes that is given by Christ alone, and that basically by asking for salvation, that one can then receive it from God. So he's challenging the church's authority by what he's read in the Bible. And this is where the key concept of Luther's faith is. The Lutheran faith is that by faith alone one is saved, not by good deeds and good acts, or by the fact that you are told you're forgiven by a priest. You are saved by faith alone. And this is what he does. He writes up his 95 theses, which are all the things, and we'll look at some of these in class. He looks at all these things and he challenges the Catholic Church in that this is what you're doing, this selling of salvation through Tetzel and others like him to pay for church reforms and church changes is is literally wrong. And he challenges this, and he takes, and now he does not nail it to the church door at Wittenberg. He actually prints this and then sends it all around in printed pamphlets, which then triggers an open war between him and Tetzel in the printing of these forms. Um, Luther then is called before the Catholic Church and to talk about his issues. That's what happens in Leipzig. Then he then is called to the Diet of Worms, where he is told to recant these in front of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He can't. Luther just will not. He won't do it. The great urban legend is that he stands, which he didn't do, but he says, "Here I stand, I can do no other." And basically what he says is, if you can show me I'm wrong, I'll accept it. But until you can show me I'm wrong, that my concept of faith alone is not God's word, then I can't. And the Catholic Church's response is recant. They don't debate him. They just say you do as you're told. And so that then feeds Luther and other followers that the Catholic Church can't respond. He then is protected by the Elector Frederick, one of these small principalities in northern Germany. So the northern princes then protect Luther. Um, we'll watch that later. The problem for that, well, the problem for the Holy Roman Empire and for the Catholic Church is that Charles V is a little bit busy. Charles V is also Henry II of Spain. So he controls Spain while at the same time he controls the Holy Roman Empire. Well, the problem is Charles has a little problem with a place called England, who is siding with the French, who are constantly fighting wars with Charles. So Charles has a war with that going on. He has the problems of these Renaissance ideas being spread throughout. He's also fighting a war with the Turks at the same time, and he's got a war internally. So he's fighting the Turks, he's dealing with England and France, and on top of it, he's dealing with issues of an internal rebellion all at the same time. So, so he's got war with France. England is part of that. He's got a war with the Turks, which is he's has to deal with. He also has to deal with all these other issues that are happening internally. And so Luther then is basically in northern Germany free to teach whatever he wants. He has the Bible translated into German. It is printed and distributed. He is preaching against the Catholic Church this whole time. And there's a war of paper that happens between him and Tetzel during this time, too. The Schmelnick League forms to defend the Lutheran faith, and they go to war with the emperor. So the emperor literally has three wars going on at the same time, at the exact same time. Um, in his Confessions of Augsburg, he writes, like we said, he translates the Bible, makes it the soul. He basically lays out the entire Lutheran doctrine, and that salvation of faith alone, the Bible is the sole authority, and the church consists of all members. So anyone who's a member of the church is the church, not the pope, not the bishops, not the religious figures. The people are Now you hear this? You hear that kind of concept here? Is the people are the church. This is a step towards where we're heading here. Remember, almost all of your founding fathers are, well, no, all your founding fathers are Protestant in some form or another. And so and this is what's going to come into England too eventually. So that correlation of church and government and the concepts that individualism and that we are the people represent the church will later be the people represent the government. So there's a lot going on here. However, Luther doesn't actually support the idea of political reform. He supports religious reform. He really didn't want to break away from the Catholic Church. He just wanted to fix it. But now the Catholic Church won't fix it, he unleashes this whole Reformation movement. But he does not, however, when peasants rose up, you're going to see the 12 articles released in 1525, where he basically denounces the rebellion by the, no, not basically, he directly renounces the peasant rebellion by saying, look, you took oaths. You took an oath that you would follow your lords, that you would do what the law says, and you aren't doing that. So Luther doesn't support peasant rebellions. He says everyone has a place in society. Religion is religion, state is the state. And those are two different things. Now, think about this, and this is the questions that are going to come up in a minute. Is there something else going on here? Because, yes, Luther doesn't promote social reform, but who's protecting Luther? Does that have something to do with why he sides against the peasants? He knows where his bread is buttered. So, yeah, use that for the next question. The Schmelnick League, we have open warfare going on between the king and, of course, Charles. He's going to end up crushing the league in 1547. But by that point, Lutheranism has spread. And then the Habsburg Bell War takes place, and that's 1521. That between 1521 and 1555, you're going to see this open war between the French and the Habsburgs. Like we said, we have a war with the Turks, we have a war with France, throw in England a little bit there, and on top of this you've got the issues of maintaining an empire outside of Europe in the New World, pirates and all that's going on. They are constantly under siege. The Holy Roman Emperor is. And by the way, this is that same war that ends the Renaissance as we know it in um, Italy with the invasion and the taking of Rome. So with all of that going on, the Holy Roman Emperor is like a traffic cop on NyQuil. It's like, you stop, just everybody stop, just for a moment. I'm tired, just stop. Okay. And so he has to stop some of these wars. He can't do much about France. All right. And oh, we forgot to mention his aunt is Catherine of Aragon, who is married to someone named Henry VIII, which might be a problem too in a lesson that's coming. So all of this is going on, all this. And so finally he's like, all right, we got to stop this war. We got to stop it. So what he does is he calls them all together, and the provisions basically in 1555, as he says in the Peace of Augsburg, which is a great piece of historical context, is he says, all right, people, stop. You pick your prince. Or no, not no, no, you pick the religion. Sorry. The princes pick the religion. If you're northern, pick one. Okay? Pick your religion. If you're a prince in southern Germany, pick your religion. And then that's what the people are. If you're north, you can be Protestant. If you're south, if you pick Catholic, be Catholic. And everybody just stop fighting for God's sakes. The thing is, this permanently divided Germany. Even still today, you see a high concentration of Catholics in the southern part of Germany and a high concentration of Lutherans in the northern part of Germany. And the biggest problem you're going to get out of all this is that there's not going to be unified Germany until 1871. You have basically instilled hatred against each other in your own state, even though you are the same people. So northern Germans hate southern Germans because the southern Germans are Catholic and the northern Germans are Protestant. And until you get a guy named Bismarck down the road who finds a different thing to unify you around than other religion, well, that's the problem. There's no German unification until we get to the 19th century. And this is one of the reasons for it. Well, in Switzerland, you're going to have some other things. A guy named Zwingli is going to question the ideas of the Eucharist and indulgences as well, and he's going to get a little fight with um, Luther here at the in Marburg. Whoop, 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 whoop. And well, the part Zwingli's important though is now we're starting to see a shift towards the Anabaptists and movement towards the idea that you choose to be faith, that there's no mysticism to this, because the Lutherans still have this idea of transubstantiation, that when you take the Eucharist, it is the body of Christ. You're actually taking Christ's body, the wafer is, and the blood is the wine is his blood. And Zwingli takes that out, that basically he's going to take a lot of the mysticism of religion out and then stress the idea of individual deciding to follow the faith, that it's an act of doing, not a requirement of doing. So a lot of the superstition comes out of it with him. The other big reformer is this guy, and you probably know about him from U.S. history because John Calvin is going to teach a thing called predestination, that basically God already knows if you're going to heaven or hell, and that basically God, in his book of people are coming, these elected people are already set. And if you go to church and have a good life, God will reveal to you that you are one of these chosen people. So the harder you work and the more you follow the faith, then you are going to be told of your destination, that you're told to go. So this promotes the idea of what we call the Puritan work ethic, which is ingrained in America because many of our founding people were, of course, Puritans. And the term Puritan comes from the Calvinist idea of purifying the church. You don't need the gold, you don't need the statues or stained glass windows. You can purify the church and only be a religious place. So purifying the church, predestination, and the idea of the Puritan work ethic, which is going to be a major part of this and this merchant class that's going to come out, those are all Calvinistic ideas. And Calvin's theories are going to spread. They're going to spread to England, Scotland, throughout parts of Northern Europe. We're in Central Europe. And Calvinism is going to also has this idea of the state is one with the religion, they're one and the same. Hence the Salem witchcraft trials that we're going to see coming out. That state that you don't separate the idea of religion and the state. Like in the Catholic Church, the state is the state and the religion is the religion. In Lutheranism, the state is the state and religion is the religion. In Puritanism, no, they're one and the same. They're a unitary type of religion, so they're all part of one concept. Um, So other sects you're going to see form Presbyterians are John Knox, who believe in congregationalism, which means you're going to have each church is separate and is its own entity, but at the same time shares a common doctrine. John Knox is also going to be important because this guy really hates queens. He thinks that women belong having children and in the kitchen and not running countries or telling men what to do or practicing like they're even in religion that they should be servitudal to their husbands. That's going to cause him some problems. Huguenots would be the French Calvinists, which we're going to talk about those when we get to religious wars. And for the Dutch, the Puritanism there is a whole different kind of thing. It's going to cause conflict with the Catholic Spain, which is going to lead to rebellion, which means more independence for the Dutch and eventually their own independence. And the Dutch, that Puritan work ethic, coupled with the hey, you do you attitude of letting other religions, is going to cause a huge growth of ideas and knowledge as well as wealth and economic trade. So the Dutch are going to prosper as Puritans through their work ethic and accepting of others. The Huguenots, we're going to see that turn into a divided France and the creation of a thing called the Bourbon dynasty. And the Presbyterians, well, John Knox is just not a nice guy for ladies. So, all right. So, and then another group we're going to see is the Anabaptists. Anabaptists believe that in the idea of choice. See how this could be politically kind of a problem here for people? The Anabaptists believe that individuals could choose to follow, and they do adult baptism. So, where you're born Catholic and then baptized as a baby. Lutherans did the same thing. The Anabaptists were baptizing people at adulthood and at the age of consent. And so this forms a whole different kind of religion and the idea of choice. You see how this may be a political issue then? If people can choose their religion, can they choose their government? Can they choose the other parts of their life besides religion? They also believed in many of these groups believed in polygamy and they believed in other things, and they also attacked they were also religious zealots in many cases, and they attacked both Lutherans and Catholics, which if you want to know the one thing that Lutherans and Catholics agree on. Now remember, all these people believe in God and they all hate each other. But if you want to know the one thing that Calvinists, Lutherans, and Catholics can all agree on, they hate Anabaptists. And that's what happened at Munster. They basically wiped them out. It was a massacre. Other Anabaptist groups, the Mennonites, Quakers, Unitarians, all of these are Anabaptist groups even still today. Mennonites can range from the Amish to simple Mennonites who that what the Amish who shun all modern conveniences to Mennonites who basically carry out their lives through good works, Quakers who have a kind of an objective of peace and they kind of you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone kind of thing going. So, um, and like we said, we talked about Munster and how they were wiped out, and the fact that women were allowed to be parts of it too. They even burned books like the Bible because they thought that the Lutheran and Catholic Bibles were the lying Bibles, and so Lutherans and Catholics all ganged up together and wiped these people out in Munster. And so you see the spread. We go from Judaism. There's a split between the Orthodox religions. This is Russia and Eastern Europe with Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. This is something completely different we're going to talk about when we get to absolute monarchs later. So that's the split. In 1054 is the first great schism. And then here's the Roman Catholic branch, which is all goes back to the Catholic Church. But then when you reform, the Anglicans, this is what Henry creates. And then Reformed, this is the Presbyterians, these are the Anabaptists. And the Lutherans form here. And then radical reformers, we have the Mennonites and that. So they all start with Judaism. They split into different versions here. And then here's the Roman Catholic. And then that splits to go over to these ideas. So make sure you've answered all the questions. We'll talk more about this in class. Thank you for spending some time with us.